Hey, wonderful people, and welcome to the Silver Coin Podcast, Episode 2. As always, you're joined by myself, Gal, and my brother, Lan. In today's episode, we will discuss what this game is actually about. So I know a lot of people listening to this podcast already know a lot of information that we will talk about today, either because they already read it in our newsletters or because they playtested the game or read our rulebook, right? But either way, we're doing this podcast as some kind of blog of our journey, and we kind of saw it fitting to talk about the game and its mechanics more generally and especially from our point of view, right? So yeah, maybe Lan, you can start.
Just a general description of the game, perhaps for the starters. As it says on BGG also, Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters is a solo, cooperative or competitive game for 1 to 5 players who will travel the map in search of missions to slay the monsters that are troubling the people of 6 kingdoms. And so on and so on. I won't go into too much detail, you can read it on BGG, but to give some general my words about what this game is about, it's basically a thematic Euro game that primarily was done as a competitive 2 to 5 player game, but we are also working on solo and cooperative mode. And basically the entire game is driven by the action selection system. So as most of the games, modern games nowadays, it's kind of a mesh of different styles of games. So it's not a pure Euro, it's not it has elements of Ameritrash, if we want to call it like that, but basically as its source it's a Euro game because it's driven by the action selection mechanic. And it's a very thematic game, so the team is very heavily involved, and yeah, you're playing as the monster hunters, traveling the world, doing contracts, trying to slay the monster, gather the most coins. The players with the most coins at the end of the game win the game. So that's the gist of it. But today we will go a bit more into detail about what this game is about, what are the mechanics this game has, and so on. Should be fun, at least for those of you who are not yet familiar with the game or mechanics in general and how things are done in this game.
Yeah, so you mentioned the core gameplay loop, right? So basically traveling the world, advancing your character, accepting contracts and defeating monsters. In the end, the one who has the most coins wins the game, right? And this gameplay loop actually stayed the same as the prototype of this game that was created 8, 9 or so many years ago, right? We already mentioned some of these things in the previous episode, but I actually find it interesting because now we call it thematic like Euro game, right? But previously it wasn't Euro game, but I mean we didn't really know a lot of these mechanics because we got into serious board gaming only like 5 to 8 years ago, and when this game was first created we didn't know a lot of these mechanics, so-called, and it was basically push your luck story-driven game, narrative game. So because we rolled the dice to move, we moved, got some event, which also involved rolling the dice. Perhaps, for example, like someone stole your horse. Do you want to pursue him and get the horse back? And you would roll the dice, and maybe you would get the horse, or you would lose the horse. But we kind of changed a lot of these things.
For sure. I wouldn't say that we didn't know the mechanics. We knew less than we know now, but we knew a lot of mechanics. We were board gaming before also, but it definitely is true that what you were saying, that as you grow, basically you grow as a board gamer. The more you play games, the more you see what things are about. It's not just purely learning about, design and how things work, but it's actually knowing the field, knowing what type of games are out there, what mechanics are used, and so on and so on. And definitely at the beginning, way back, like almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, as you say, it was actually roll and move. which is almost you could call it a terrible mechanic. It's not the way you want to do things. It had a twist on that, so it was not just pure luck. There was some strategy involved and so on, and there was a lot of statistics that was put in onto the map and stuff like that. But nonetheless, yeah, it was terrible when you look back at it. It definitely was not a good system to go about. So yeah, we had that. It was a lot more push your luck stuff. You still have a lot. This game is push your luck. In a sense of fights and stuff like that, but you have a lot more control. You basically now it's about preparing and making sure that you can mitigate that luck to a great extent, even maybe almost for 100%. You can be prepared for some things, but each such preparation will take some time, and thus you want to manage how much you want to prepare versus how much time you're going to take preparing. But back then, yeah, as you say, it was a lot of story elements, a lot about some events happening. We called it stories and happenings. It was done so you would have stuff to do while you were doing contracts and stuff like that, so that there would be more things happening in general, and it was thematically interesting, as you say. Someone stole your horse, what you're going to do, or something like that, and then you had a couple of options, and a lot of them were like luck based, like roll a die and see what happens, or sometimes you would make a decision. Some were good, some were bad. Sometimes you even had some items that you could use, that you gathered along the way to help you make those decisions, and get it basically to become to be something that's positive in the end. But yeah, all of that was dropped because of the luck element. So yeah, nowadays it is yeah, we grew as designers of the game, for sure. In 9 years, you learn what is the problem, like first time, second time, third time. Those story events and stuff like that can be fun. Then people get to know them, and it's no longer interesting reading the same event and stuff like that. Then you also maybe sometimes learn about the decisions that you do about the events and stuff like that, and it's not interesting also. And then the luck of the roll and or unlucky rolls can also be frustrating. And so all of those things, they become repetitive, they become frustrating to some extent. And what is one of the most important things is actually that story driven games that work like that, with such elements and done in such a way, they're usually solo or cooperative by nature, and that makes them work a bit more. Because if something bad happens, if something good happens and stuff like that, you deal it alone or you deal it in a group, and it affects all of you. As soon as you make a game about competitive and you do those type of things, then it becomes design wise a problem. One player has a good event, another player has a bad event. One player rolled a good result, the other player rolled a bad result. So as soon as you start doing competitive, that it's no longer fun, and it's no longer fair, and it becomes a problematic thing. And in addition to that, you also have to consider downtime, which again is way different for competitive games than for cooperative or solo experiences. That's why now when you're doing those longer fights and stuff in Tainted Grail, you can bear with it. But even so, we still know that Tainted Grail, usually with 4 players, it can be problematic because 2 players get engaged in a battle, but 2 players don't, so there's a lot of downtime in that. While battles are strategic, then it can be a problem that they just last a lot of time. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration when doing those type of things. And yeah, for sure, it changed a lot.
Yeah, and we actually replaced this mechanic with our preparation phase now. I mean, replaced. We filled the void that it left out when we removed the stories and happenings, but more on preparation phase, I guess, a bit later. I would actually like to start with the auction phase as one of my favorite parts and mechanics of the game, but I might be subjective on this part. But we actually start the game with an auction phase, and we select our starting characters, our starting locations, and starting magic and some resources with it. And why I find it so interesting and good actually is because of the system of how it works, right? Because each player can get every character and every starting location. I mean, not necessarily, but let's say I start bidding. There are 4 different spots that you can place your player token on, right? When you're bidding, and each grant you different amount of coins. And as we mentioned, coins are victory points at the end. So basically, you can start with different amount of victory points. So why would you want to start with less victory points, some might ask, right? And it's basically pretty simple, because the lower the spot, right, the more victory points / coins you get, and the lower the spot, the lower priority you have for certain bid, right? So if I bid on the lowest spot, which would grant me 100 coins, that would just mean that every other player can outbid me and get the same character for basically less victory points, but they can outbid me and they can basically select this character from themselves. And if I wanted to log the character 100% for me, I would need to start with 0 coins. So this is like 100 coins difference, which can mean a lot in the late game. And this repeats, right, for 3 times, basically for the first time when you select the characters, and the second time when you select the starting location and kingdom knowledge, and for the last time when you select the starting magic. And with more players, it gets even more clustered, even more messy, and I like that. That's why I personally like the 3, 4, maybe even 5 player game, because these bids get really messy and they become even really funny, because someone bids, like, for example, on the second lowest spots for 70 coins, as in I don't want anyone to outbid me, because going for 40 coins might be a bit stretchy at the end, right? Because they start with so less coins than me, and basically they're so proud of themselves, and then someone really doesn't want some specific character, right? And they outbid him and they're just shocked. And when there are 5 players, this happens a lot. And I think this specifically happens in starting location the most. So yeah, that's why I find this mechanic really interesting and intriguing, right?
Yeah, it's a kind of a mini game players play before actually starting the game, but that is a very important element of the entire game. Because, as you said, you basically pick your character, you basically pick your starting location, which is very important, and starting magic and some resources. And all of that has to do with, and is connected with the variable setup of the game that each time, from those things that you're picking, so from the starting characters, starting locations are different every single time. But then there is also the entire setup of the game is so different. Like, you have different kings in different kingdoms each game. You have different townsfolk in different kingdoms each game. Different herbs growing in different kingdoms each game. Different kingdom cards that we are going to get to, that you start the game with. Different missions that are placed at the beginning of the game. Some kingdoms that basically give you contracts, and certain kingdoms maybe not at the start of the game, and so on and so on. And when you're doing those first things, like picking character, picking starting location, you actually are looking at the entire game board and the state of the board that is different every single game, and you are going like, should I start there? But then maybe I would rather start there, but maybe that there is also okay. So you start doing that, and then you basically also place a value on that thought of yours about where you want to do, where you want to start, what character you want to play, and how things change with that, and it becomes a mini game. Yes, and I like it. I also like it because it helps balance the game. It means, in a sense, you think a character is better, go try to outbeat other people, try to try to maybe even secure it with saying, okay, I'm bidding for this character, I'm bidding 0 coins. I'm bidding starting zero coins, meaning I start the game with the 0 coins and no one can outbid me for this character. Cool. Then other players will choose different characters and they will start with 100 coins more than you on the start of the game, which is 100 more victory points. So in that sense, you're kind of a balancing also. You think certain characters are stronger and so on, even though we try to do the balancing as much as possible. This is another level of balancing at play here, right? So yeah, it becomes fun. I agree. I love it as well as a mechanic, just pure mechanic. It works well, and the fact that you're kind of building your starting character, like just which character, where he starts the game, what kind of magic he starts with. You're kind of building the character also, right? Your starting setup, if you want. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and then basically the next phase, the first phase of the game round, because the game round actually consists of 3 phases, right? Preparation phase, action phase, and then cleanup phase, where you just move to the next month and stuff. And it's preparation phase, and this is the phase I was talking about that kind of replaces the stories and happenings, because this is the phase which you are doing when you're traveling, when basically nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. You might be gathering resources otherwise in your action phases, but this is the stuff that occupies you during your traveling, your exploring of the world, right? And this is basically drafting cards and playing them and gathering resources or gaining additional movement. And it's basically similar to how Ethnos or how Ticket to Ride mechanic works, because you basically have few face-up cards depending on the number of players, right? A number of players plus 1. And you basically have 6 different colors representing 6 different kingdoms, and then 4 different possible symbols on those cards, which you play and gain resources, right? And that's basically it. You do one of the 3 possible things. You either draft, you either replace, or you play the cards, and it's just like a mini game, another mini game that you're doing, which helps you advancing your character, gathering resources, and in the end fighting monsters, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe for those people who don't understand. So first you do the auction phase, 3 auctions I should say, before the game officially starts, but it's already a start of the game, I guess. And then basically you go to turns, and each turn consists out of 3 main phases. The first one being the preparation phase, then it's the biggest one, the action phase, and then the cleanup. And we are now talking about the preparation phase. And the way that is done is what Gal was saying, similar to the Ethnos ticket type of style, drafting, playing cards, or in this case you can also replace, but the feeling is the same. The swiftness with which this is happening is the same. So basically you're just either draw 2 cards, play cards, you play them by color or by symbol, and yes, the cards themselves, the kingdom cards as they are called, they are very multi-purpose. So in that sense they are a bit different than Ticket to Ride, even Ethnos, because these cards, you play them for resources, and you have 4 different type of resources on them, from reputation, as guys said, movement, flow, or experience. But there is also the bidding power of the cards that we will get to later on. So you can use those cards later on in the game for bidding purposes. So they have the bidding strength of the card also, and the color of the card is also important. And then you also have sometimes this ancient knowledge symbol on them, which can also be important. So the cards are multi-purpose, but the swiftness with which the phase is done is quite similar to Ethnos and Ticket to Ride feeling. And I wanted that. I wanted quick feel to the entire thing, because I think it's neat. But maybe a bit more in depth about the decisions that why you should pick some of the cards. But in the end, after many playtests, it shows that the entire thing is very fast. And yeah, while the cards themselves may may look like abstract things, they are actually thematically representing the emphasis you're putting on your journey. So while within the game you will later on in the action phase be doing stuff like moving, fighting and stuff like that, with these cards, because each turn in this game is represented by a calendar month, so January, February and so on, basically because your entire turn lasts for the entire month, these cards kind of represent the emphasis within that month. So let's say I pick more or play cards that are more for movement and stuff like that, so kingdom cards for movement. That means that I move more in that month, because when I'm playing them for movement, I move, and then later on I can do the action to move again. So I'm doing the emphasis that I traveled more in that month. If I play the cards for experience, I was gaining experience and learning stuff. If I play them for the reputation, I was getting more reputation in that month, like I don't know, helping the local populace harvest crops. I don't know, pick your poison. But anyway, it's that's the entire thing about how that is done, and then the entire preparation phase and the way you're picking up cards, it leads to the next mechanic that we are doing, that we can talk about. That's hand management. So it leads to hand management because you are limited with the size of your hand at the start of the game, but then that size can start increasing by you gaining knowledge and stuff like that. So those two mechanics mesh together and connect in that sense as well.
Yeah, and then we move to the next phase, which is action phase, which is actually the main phase of the game, where most of the action we will be doing, right, as the players, as characters. And basically the main things you're going to be doing is traveling the world, fighting monsters, and basically advance your character, level up your character, quote to quote, right? For example, learning magic, learning knowledge, buying potions, gathering herbs, etc., etc. And yeah, this is where you mentioned the action selection system, where basically each player has 3 action tokens. 2 of them are free, and the third one is actually a bit costly. For example, 1 physical flow, which just represents that your character needs to exert themselves a bit more, I guess, spend a little more energy to perform another action, and basically do more than others, perhaps. And basically you have 2 types of actions that you can do. One are the player action and one are the contested actions. And basically the player actions are the same for all people. I mean, the global actions are also the same for all people, but the point of the player actions are that they are uncontested. You can always perform them regardless of what other players do, right? And each player can perform, for example, movement action that is uncontested. And this is basically the movement, the location action, where you will be fighting monsters and stuff, the important actions. But there are also the contested actions, the global actions, which every player will be contesting to basically perform them, right? Because some of them might be good, especially in the months, in the rounds that you're not doing other than traveling, right? Much other than traveling. For example, you're not fighting monsters, you're not buying in the market, you're just traveling, and you have excess actions you can use, and the global actions are usually the good actions which you can use to basically get resources, to draw another card from the kingdom cards, right, for the preparation phase which we mentioned. And this is where the turn order is actually also important, because if you're in the first in the turn order, you can basically secure yourself one of the global actions, which might be good, and other people cannot do this same action in this same turn, right? And
yeah. So yeah, player actions, uncontested actions, as you said, on your player boards, and then you have global actions on the map itself, where basically it's contested actions, and you can go there and then basically block other players from going there. So you have some player interactions there as well. But basically, yeah, the principle is simple. It's kind of a worker placement, action selection, call it what you want to call it, right? System that basically is pure Euro game-ish, in that sense. So that's why I say that, because this is the way the game is driven by you doing those actions. That's why I say that in its principle, it's actually a Euro game. Even though then later on we come to the dice rolling, dice checking, whatever you want to call it, when doing the battles. But yeah, in its essence, it's definitely that. Things are, sometimes it's just about grabbing resources, other times it's about jockeying your way through the turn order, either going to the first place, just moving up and so on, or then it can be connected to some other mechanics. Like for instance, a good example here would be you going to the global action dice drafting. So you basically go to that spot, you move one in turn order, but you also get to draft dice, and there you come to the mechanic called dice drafting. We have a special board with the so-called color dice. The dice over 3 colors plus one special die, which is of multicolors, and it's kind of a unique Joker-like die that can be used for any color. But basically, you have blue, red, and green dice, and you have 3 areas in that sense that you can collect those dice from 3 different areas, and each area of dice works differently, and also the setup at the beginning of the game is different. But it's cool. Basically, you're drafting dice, and then you're adding those dice to your player area. And yes, and in general, it's about tableau building when you're doing the character growth, whatever. When you're learning new skills and so on, you're adding cards. Think of it like terraforming Mars. You're adding additional cards next to your player board, which indicated you have learned new magic, new skills and stuff like that to use along your journey. So yeah, something like that.
I just realized we've been recording for almost half an hour already, so yeah, we need to kind of compress it a little bit, I think. But overall, yes, I think
it's fun talking about our game.
And you basically.
But yeah, we wanna keep it short, so we are gonna try to close it a bit faster.
Yeah. It gets out of control a bit faster, I guess, because you're passionate about what we're saying, and it basically gets out of control more quickly. But anyway, I think the next major thing that we definitely cannot leave it out is the battling of the monsters, to fight monsters, right? Because this is basically the main thing which people think about, and what you're not the main thing that you're doing here, but your main goal, right, is to fight monsters, to slay monsters and collect rewards in terms of coins and also reputation and experience and stuff. So basically, and I also think fighting monsters is fun. I mean, I know a lot of people that might dislike the idea of rolling dice to fight the monster, because technically speaking, and I mean this is probably never gonna happen, but technically speaking, each player can roll 1-1, because you roll 2 dice, right? Like 20 times in a row. This is statistically basically impossible, right? Improbable, but still it is technically possible, and this slight chance, and basically someone might be a bit unluckier, but someone might be a bit lucky, but it also provides unpredictability, some replayability when fighting different monsters. But the main thing I would mention here is basically 2 things. The first thing I really like is the uniqueness of monsters, especially when you go up the level, because there are 3 levels of monsters, the level 1 through level 3, right? And basically each monster is unique in its own sense, because it has its own weaknesses and its own strengths. And basically when you as a player get the contract and you basically prepare to fight a monster, you're looking at these weaknesses, these strengths of this monster, which you try to prevent, right? So for instance, if a certain monster is stronger in the rainy days, you would basically try to fight it during a clear weather or during a drought or something like that, so this monster doesn't get stronger in this sense. But it also maybe provide you additional strength if you have certain magic, so you would maybe try to acquire this certain magic in order to fight this monster more easily, right? And maybe this is something that will help you, but it is also something that might save you some coin, because you also have potions and stuff, and you might fight some monster, right, unprepared. So let's say some monster is weaker if you have certain magics, but you don't have these magics, or is weaker during the winter, but it's not winter, it's actually summer or something like that, and you don't feel like waiting. You can always buy potions, right? You can buy two strength potion, one night potion, let's say, and you fight the monster, but it can cost you, and especially low level monsters that do not provide as many coins that you can basically allow yourself to basically just fight it with buying potions. But the main thing here is that either way, even if the fighting mechanic is rolling dice and it's unpredictable and it's luck based, it is still you can still prepare for monsters. So each monster has its own strength, but you can basically lower that strength. You can also have protection magic, and you have experience with which you can re-roll dice, right? So there are so many things that you can do during the battle that you basically negate the luck, that you prepare yourself so much that even if you're unlucky, you can still slay this monster. And if you're lucky, you maybe even spend less resources on something like that. But you basically, each player can defeat each monster if they're prepared enough. This is the point I'm making, and it's unpredictable and it's fun, and basically this is one of my personal favorite things in the game, right? I mentioned auction phase, the fighting monsters is also one of those things, right?
I was at the beginning, we had different fighting system. I mean, we had a similar fighting system, but very luck driven at the beginning. Then we switched, or I switched to have the deck building mechanic in the fight. So you would build a deck, with different cards doing different things. It was very interesting. I think it was very interesting in how it was done. Yeah. The monster would have its own deck. Also, which is for those of you who have been monitoring the Witcher Old World game, you saw that they have that as well. We actually had that as well, like 3 years ago or something like that. We had that, but I moved away from that. And the reason I moved away from that, there were many reasons, but one of the main reasons was the fights are maybe fun for you, maybe for the guy playing the monster, maybe, but definitely not, or less, for the other people doing the waiting downtime. So I was thinking, no, fights need to be faster. They need to be also controllable. You need to have that mitigation of the luck feeling of preparation and stuff like that. So we started combining that rolling the dice mechanic with the tableau building mechanic. So you get all those card skills that you can prepare, as you mentioned, magic, different fighting stuff that you can have during the battle. Then experience resource basically is used for you to re-roll the dice. So that's it. Then you have the color dice that I mentioned before. Those can help you in battle. You have just different ways of mitigating your luck in battle. And now it's a lot more faster, and that's cool, because that means that on average players usually fight like 6-7 monsters each game, and we are still good with time. We didn't talk about that, but time-wise, we are playing games usually from 45 minutes to maybe max 1 hour and 15 per player. So in a 4-player game, we will be playing a game from 3 hours and a half to 4 hours usually. So it's still a bigger game, but things are fast. Things are for such a grand big game that we have designed. I think that is very manageable, and you also have to know that a lot of playtesting was done through Tabletopia, and we still need to do a lot of playtesting through real life because of COVID situation and so on. And usually in real life, a lot of things we are expecting to be actually faster, because Tabletopia can get really clunky when doing those things like rolling dice and stuff like that. And one final thing that I wanted to mention is, we said you're doing contracts, we are doing missions. The way that missions come out is also interesting, but maybe we talk about it some other time. But the thing is that then at the end you get some resources, and you're paid coin for fulfilling the contracts. And coins in this game are your victory points, and victory points in this game are hidden information. So you each have your bag of coins, and you're putting those coins in, and no one knows exactly how many coins someone has. And I think that's very important in this game, and it's actually one of my favorite things, that basically it keeps you guessing the entire game and thinking that you're in it, because the end results are usually quite around there. You always like that feeling that you say, oh, if I done that differently, oh, if I slayed that monster instead of this one or whatever, and I would be able to win. That feeling is always good in games. But also, like, maybe if you have done really poorly and some other players have done an amazing job, you still don't have that feeling of a Grand Canyon kind of gap between you, because you never know how things will go for him till the end of the game, and he doesn't know how things will go for you, and you don't know exactly how much coins he has, and he doesn't know exactly how much you have. And what happens is that usually the players that feel that they are doing well, they start getting more cautious at the end of the game, preparing, maybe over preparing for some fights and so on, just because they don't want to get that advantage thrown out of the window or whatever. And then other players who feel they are doing more poorly, they become more desperate, more daring, preparing maybe a bit less for the fights and so on. And then because they're preparing a bit less, they're spending less resources, less actions on doing that, and they are gaining some of that. So that's why I think, like, for instance, things like luck is important, because it always gives you a puncher's chance of doing something, and I think that makes a great that makes for a great story. That story that a little guy that could, a little monster hunter that could till the end of the game. Something like that.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, there are basically a lot of things we can also discuss. Few being, for example, the character abilities and the uniqueness of characters, or for example, the weather system and the time aspect of the game, which are all really interesting aspects. But I would maybe save them for another episode where we can actually focus on them. The last thing I would actually mention, unless you have any other ideas and
No.
options
There is
about
so
that?
much to talk.
Yeah, I
There's
know.
so much to talk that we can talk about the herb cards, we can talk about the reputation tracks. There are 2 of them. We can talk about the special action cards and the way the bidding for them works. We can talk about the special weather that you mentioned. We can talk about the market stuff, the townsfolk, the different kings. We can talk about the
Yeah,
we can
there are
talk
so
about
many different things. We can
yeah.
actually save all of them for later, but the one I actually wanted to mention is the special action cards, because I
Yeah.
think they're pretty big part of the game, because when you normally think about the RPG game or the game where you're playing as a character, a certain character, which you're role playing, in this case a monster hunter, right? You're basically trying to advance him, to level him up, or her, right? To the certain degree, so you can fight stronger monsters in our case, which provide you bigger rewards, more profitable rewards. And in our case, this is done by either by learning magic and knowledge, which we already mentioned, but we didn't go into detail, maybe later. But the main thing is not going to market and buy yourselves a shiny new sword which costs so many coins. Maybe this would have been a good option, but we actually felt that this engine building mechanic is more fun and basically more balanced. You can maybe talk about this a bit more, but basically what you're doing is that there are certain rounds that are specifically intended to basically buy special action cards with bidding. So you gained either. I mean, you pay the kingdom cards from your hand, you bid those kingdom cards from your hand to basically try to select the special action card first. And these special action cards are actually different. Some provide you different bonuses in battle. These are the color dice, for example, that you mentioned. So because the color dice you basically use for those special action cards, for example, you roll red color dice to basically trigger the effect of, for example, shield or dodge or whatever you have, some certain ability that you have to basically protect yourself or to deal additional damage or something like that, or basically have hidden paths that you can travel faster throughout the world, or maybe just have something that helps you throughout the preparation phase or to move you up the turn order to gain additional knowledge, whatever it is. There are so many things that these special action cards provide, and basically it builds certain engine, a tableau in this case, right? Because it is basically a tableau building. But yeah, this is what you're building, and there are so many different strategies and ways you can go, right, when you're drafting those.
The system is very Euro-like in that sense, that the thought behind it was, let's make a natural progression of the characters. If you leave the market idea open, if you just say gather experience, then unlock certain new things, you are usually following very similar path. Sometimes you lose control of the progression. Sometimes it can be very quick. Sometimes it can be slow. In this sense, you're giving each character kind of a similar progression system, because at the moment you can gain those cards to gain the skills that will aid you in your journey, all the players will do it at the same time. So then becomes that bidding mechanic about using your kingdom cards to try to get the best of them, or the ones most suited for your characters. But no matter what, all the players will gain them if they participate in that. And that's not the only way to build your tableau and so on. You still have magic, you learn, you still are learning knowledge as you walk through the world and so on. But those are basically gained at that moment. And with the variety of cards that we have 61 cards, and out of those currently around 45 are totally unique, and so on. But basically, yeah, it just makes for a different journey, different decision making every single time. Similar with the monsters, like we have 30 different monsters within the game. We didn't mention that, but basically we do. So it's all about seeing what the game has to offer at the start, seeing what game states are changing between the game, and then adapting, optimizing your way through the entire thing. So and the same can be said by the special action cards. Some are one-time special action cards. Some are just you exhaust them and then you can reuse them again. Some require resources, others don't. Some are battle-like, others are more about the journey. Like for instance, you mentioned the hidden paths. they are basically involved with the map. We have 3 different hidden paths that players can walk if they obtain those cards. So yeah, definitely an interesting mechanic, but more Euro-like in the way it works. So it's not a traditional sense of your Gloomhaven, or for those who play PC games, it's not Diablo type of thing, upgrading your character. It's different. It's definitely different, and we know why we did it. And hopefully a lot of you will like it. What else to say, right? It's different. It's definitely different.
Definitely. I think we have been productive. We have been ranting for 45 minutes already. Damn, this goes fast. This goes way faster than I thought. The time flies by. But anyway, I think we can finish on that note and leave it on that. And yes, thanks for listening. Anyone who did, right? If anyone.
Yeah. We want to thank our family for listening to this podcast. We also want to thank all of our friends who are listening to the podcast. We're also thanking to the
we're just kidding.
The members of our team who are listening to the podcast. But for anyone who is going to be looking through those, I think you can learn a lot about the project, about the team doing that. So if you want to hear us rant, we are here, we're doing this. It's gonna be fun for us also when we look back at these things. But that's it for today, and hopefully next time we do it a bit shorter. Although I love it, I just I want to keep it closer to half an hour stuff.
Yeah, I would also like to, but because the time flies by so fast, it's hard to keep track of how many things we say and how long we talk about certain things. But I think the last thing I need to mention, and it's not regarding the game. Yes, I know it's always the last thing, but if you like it and if you want to support us, subscribe and leave a like, because it helps us. In someone who has never heard of this game might find this podcast, this game, and basically join our community and help us grow, help us make the better game. And I think this is important. So subscribe, leave a like.
Help us in becoming influencers instead of game designers.
This has been Lan dream job.
It wasn't about this project at all. It was me becoming a YouTuber. So
okay, we will not.
We are going now.
We're really going now. So bye.
Bye, guys. But we are coming back 2 weeks from now. Bye.
Bye.